Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, a look at contention building over the rash of recall petitions in our province. But first, let's kick off the program with a significant energy agreement.
With the removal of the emissions cap on Alberta, as well as the removal of the net zero power regs, I think it's going to unleash an incredible amount of investment and allow us to work together on important nation-building projects. So it's the first step, I think, of what will be a few more steps we have to take together, but I'm very pleased that the Prime Minister has heard our concerns and responded to them.
It creates an energy transition, all aspects of energy, but really sets the stage for an industrial transformation. At the core of the agreement, of course, is a priority to have a pipeline to Asia. That's going to make Canada stronger, more independent, more resilient.
The Premier and Prime Minister in Calgary this morning signing a memorandum of understanding that could reshape Alberta's energy sector, and it provides a framework that paves the way to a new oil pipeline to the northwest BC coast. So let's pick up the discussion with tonight's politics panel. And joining us this evening, Spearman, a former mayor of Lethbridge, and John Santos is a political analyst. Good evening to you both. Chris, what's landing with you about the significance of this memorandum of understanding?
Well, I think the Prime Minister is really displaying his negotiation skills, and he's going to have to continue to do that going forward. He's managed to get this MOU in place, and now he has to sell that to members of his caucus, and certainly people like the Premier of British Columbia. And how the next steps unfold, this is a bit of a minefield for him. We'll see how this all develops. Certainly, it's a big win for Premier Smith in Alberta.
Well, now, John, is this all about time, place, and people involved? How likely is an agreement of this nature to have happened at any point during the Trudeau Liberal era?
Very, very unlikely that it would have happened before. A lot of things have come together. I mean, not just Danielle Smith and Mark Carney and their teams and governments who I mean worked very hard to make this happen, but also I mean let's think about the structural changes that have happened in the world over the past decade, right? Everything from the second rise of Donald Trump, the trade war, a retreat from free trade globally, a growing concern over cost of living and energy security, the rise of AI and the associated needs of that. And also just this growing sense that Canada needs to be more secure economically and with regard to energy. And then the carrot on top of this are the technological changes tied to carbon capture and sequestration. All of those things came together, including the parties at the table, to make this happen. And I do have to wonder if you remove any of those elements, if we would have gotten the same kind of announcement with sort of the same degree of broad change that's being proposed that we saw this morning.
Chris, on that timing front, there is a very important meeting happening this weekend where the UCP is concerned. That's the AGM taking place in Edmonton. What message do you see the Premier taking into that gathering where the signing and substance of this MOU are concerned, about the relationship this creates between the two levels of government?
Well, I think it is a big win for the Premier, and she's going into her own party convention. I think that's pretty safe territory. There are people in Alberta who aren't going to be happy with this, and certainly people in other provinces who are not going to be happy with this. And our Indigenous component, the Indigenous populations are going to have some concerns that they might have been left out of this. But the UCP annual convention is a pretty safe place to land right after the signing of this agreement.
John, where do you see this leaving Danielle Smith with elements of her base who support separation?
It's tough because, I mean, surveys have shown that up to 50% of UC supporters would support, separation of some kind, or at least the idea of it. And so, as Chris rightly pointed out, is this going to be enough for them? And that's always been the grand bargain within the UCP tent, is sort of chumming enough red meat, some of the culturally conservative policies that the base really wants, and saber rattling enough against Ottawa to placate them, but also doing enough for, more economically business-minded conservatives who really couldn't care less about those social issues and just want, less regulations and less red tape. And so it remains to be seen if this will placate the base, alternatively, or if it will sort of encourage enough of these, economic but not social conservatives to stick with Danielle Smith. And I guess we'll see what happens at the UCP AGM.
Chris, what comes now of pipeline politics, especially that opposition you were mentioning a moment ago, opposition coming from across the border in BC?
Well, the Prime Minister is going to have to wear this a deal that he's made with perhaps not a natural ally, and basically going back on what the Liberal Party has stood for in terms of access to large tankers to the BC coast. Is that going to change now? If it is, there is going to be some repercussions in BC, I'm pretty sure, that he will have to deal with, and within his current caucus now.
John, from that Carney government perspective, where do you see the substance of this MOU leaving divisions within the federal Liberal caucus?
I mean, it does put some of the more left-leaning Liberals in a tight spot, as Chris said. But on the other hand, where are they going to go? To a moribund NDP that federally doesn't even have official party status? And so that's sort of one of the things that Prime Minister Carney has at his disposal. The other thing is that there are both carrots and sticks to bring BC on board here, right? There's the promise of revenue sharing, that BC cannot reasonably be expected to shoulder, more of the environmental costs than Alberta without also having a share of the revenue and profits that come from this. And so I think those carrots and sticks are both going to be needed if Prime Minister Carney is going to bring, Premier David Eby and a lot of British Columbians and the BC members of his caucus on side. But I mean, the last few years have shown us that, there can be odd political alliances that happen. And if we look at some of the ideological flexibility that David Eby has displayed in the past, with regard to involuntary treatment of people with addictions issues, for example, I think anything is possible in these very unstable political times that we find ourselves in.
And Chris, do you see any kind of shift in the Alberta political dynamic as a result of all of this? How much does the landscape change as a result of this MOU signing?
I'm not sure that we're going to see anything immediate. People who had separatist sympathies and those components are going to continue their agenda. If Premier Danielle Smith chooses to do so, this is something a flag that she can wave and say, Canada's working. Is she inclined to do that? We will see. I'm not sure. Today she seems happy going into the convention, and how will she feel next week?
Well, the MOU will certainly give us lots to talk about. Welcome back, and we are rejoined now by this evening's politics panel. Gentlemen, we heard from a former Elections Alberta official before the break on building discussions around the ever-growing list of recall petitions. John, being that UCP MLAs and cabinet ministers are the targets of these citizen-led initiatives, how much of a fight do you see the Smith government putting up here?
I mean, yeah, they've already shown, at least the members themselves being recalled, that they don't like, and that they think that this is in bad faith and not in accordance with what the drafters of the framers of the legislation intended. But I mean, the whole point about giving citizens the ability to do something is that it's not the government's role to adjudicate what their motives are. We don't ask what people's motives are when they show up to the polling stations at election time. And the same thing goes for referendum and plebiscite campaigns, right? They built the Pandora's box, which is now being opened, and I think that they're ruining the fact that they built it.
Chris, Minister Nally's assertion that recall is being weaponized to force an election, how much does that change the conversation around how the UCP caucus defends its records, how it fights back?
I don't think that's a logical argument that's going to fly with Albertans. They have to allow the process to take place, and I think some of the MLAs are going to have to stand on their records. Not all of them have... moving forward with initiatives as this government has done, which they did not campaign on, has created a lot of this backlash. And the way that the Alberta Next campaign, that panel was conducted, has caused the Premier to go from favorable territory to unfavorable territory in 6 months.
John, what's to be made of the position, all these recall petitions on top of those pushing referendum questions, puts Elections Alberta in?
It's a very difficult spot. And I mean, I think that's one of the ways that we might see the UCP government fight against these recall and petition efforts is by not giving Elections Alberta further resources to deal with all of these things. And, you know, that's sort of one way of maliciously complying, I guess, with this is letting it happen, but not giving the elections agency the proper resources to actually do these things effectively. And so, yeah, I mean, that could be one thing that we see. The government has certainly indicated skepticism as to whether or not Elections Alberta actually needed more resources, though it's pretty clear that with this unprecedented deluge of petitions and recalls that, no, they absolutely do need more resources to make it happen.
Chris, we didn't get into dollars and cents with Drew Westwater, but given the number of recall petitions, 14, possibly more on the way, what position does that leave the legislature committee that oversees funding of Elections Alberta and the degree of support it has in dealing with this added workload and the need for more dollars?
Well, how that committee deals with it will be watched by Albertans, and if sufficient dollars aren't provided, I think that only adds ammunition to those seeking to recall MLAs. If the government tries to control the process, I think it could backfire.
John, what weight do you see the recall petitions carrying in discussions on the floor of this weekend's UCP AGM, especially given our earlier discussion around today's MOU signing with the Carney government?
Yeah, it's certainly going to stoke the anger amongst the more strident members, the more farther right members of the UCP membership. Now, I don't know the exact rules around submitting resolutions. I don't think that further resolutions can be submitted, but I don't think this would necessarily sort of dampen UCP members' enthusiasm for these, resolutions. I think they certainly envision that they would end up using it more against NDP MLAs than UCP, or than have it be used against their own MLAs. But yeah, I think certainly around the rhetoric that we're going to see, this is sort of going to stoke the fires among those elements of Danielle Smith's base.
Chris, what will you be watching for to emerge from this weekend's UCP AGM, and what will it say about the direction the Smith government takes forward?
Well, I think the Premier has an opportunity to speak to her base and offer a new direction if she chooses to do so. We'll see what that looks like. I'm not sure what she's got planned. I wouldn't be, there must be some surprises, and the government has to reinvigorate itself and I think certainly this memorandum of agreement, MOU, is going to be one of the things that does that. What else do they have to offer?
And John, last question to you. Beyond any outside chatter around an MOU signing, recall petitions, is there one particular agenda item, a resolution that you're watching for that will really dictate the Smith government's move forward?
I'm most interested to see what happens with a lot of the more culturally conservative resolutions, right? Like there's one calling for withholding government funding for abortions later in the course of pregnancy. There's one on sort of guaranteeing the right for people to defend themselves if their property is being if they're being robbed, that sort of thing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with those and the discussion around them, because there's certainly a lot of history of UCP resolutions being adopted by this particular government as official policy.
Indeed. All right, gentlemen, we'll leave it there. Great to see you both. Thank you for this.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Michael.